Islam emerges in the 7th century after Judaism and Christianity. It is the last born of the 3 monotheist religions. From the Arabian Peninsula, the Prophet Muhammad and his disciples will conquer an immense territory. The spread of Islam is rapid and deeply rooted. The conquests of this new religion are reinforced by the construction of new places of worship, mosques. Bearing witness to the faith of men and markers of the power of great Muslim rulers, mosques tell us through their diversity the whole history of Islam. A history marked by conflicts between the successors of the Prophet at the head of powerful dynasties. Each of these dynasties asserting its own cultural integration, identity, and architectural genius, leaving a monumental mark in the history of sacred architecture. From the Middle Ages to the borders of Asia, from Andalusia to the shores of the Bosphorus, in the cities of Isfahan or Cairo, the most beautiful jewels of Islamic art reflect the competition, but also incredible cross-cultural interactions and influences. At the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632, his followers led dazzling military conquests. In order to establish their legitimacy, the objective was set: to take Jerusalem, to impose themselves at any cost in the holy city of Jews and Christians. One man will leave his mark on the city: Caliph Abd al-Malik of the Umayyad dynasty. A great strategist, he decided at the end of the 7th century to build a massive monument, brilliant, intriguing, and capable of creating a visual shock: the Dome of the Rock.
One of the functions of this building is for it to be seen from a distance, to be a focal point. It was the highest building in the Holy City, and then this gold coating made it shine. The testimonies are innumerable since the end of the 7th century on the magnificence of this building.
In Jerusalem, Islam is a new religion. Caliph Abd al-Malik deliberately orders the construction of the Dome of the Rock at a specific location. It overlooks the 2 sacred monuments of Christians and Jews: the Holy Sepulchre, the tomb of Jesus, and the Wailing Wall, the remains of Solomon's Temple.
Abd al-Malik wanted this place to be the most beautiful, if I may use that expression, in all of Jerusalem, in relation to the new religion that had entered the city. Of course, this city had its history before the arrival of Islam, and Islam was aware of it. But from the point of view of Islam, and also I think from Abd al-Malik's point of view, we built this space as a message for Muslims, but also for other religions.
This message is for everyone. Here, men and women mix, contrary to the rule observed in all mosques. Because, surprisingly, this essential monument in the history of Islam is not a mosque. For Caliph Abd al-Malik, the Dome of the Rock serves above all to deliver a message to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, Jews and Christians alike. It is part of a vast enterprise of seduction. It's a powerful proselytizing tool to get the new religion and its prophet Muhammad admitted. On the interior walls, mosaics with discrete inscriptions are embedded in the elements of the decor. A text written in Kufik, one of the oldest forms of Arabic writing, over a length of 240 meters, surrounds the construction. The message reveals the meaning of the monument, directly addressed to the Jews and Christians, known here as the people of the book.
People of the book, do not exaggerate your religion. Say about God only the truth, that the Messiah Jesus is only the Son of Mary, and that he was only God's messenger.
These inscriptions are fascinating because it's a text which is strictly addressed to Jews and Christians. First of all, by evoking the figure of Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus, son of Mary, to emphasize his prophetic role. Jesus is one of the greatest prophets in the chain of prophets, one of the greatest prophets of Islam. And at the same time, Jesus is only a prophet. Jesus is not the Son of God.
This message inscribed Islam as the third monotheism. The monument is built around an extremely symbolic rock. According to tradition, it is on this rock that Abraham intended to sacrifice his son Isaac.
It's a bare rock. We can see the bedrock, so it's not soil, nor is it earth. It's the bedrock that's there, like all the rock outcrops in Jerusalem, to witness the origins of an original story.
In a cave under the rock, the Muslim faithful come to pray, addressing their devotions to Abraham. The rock symbolizes an original narrative that the Jews and Christians already have in common and is naturally inscribed in the new religion.
The founding act of the three monotheisms, the founding act of the covenant between the divine and humans through God's friend Abraham, is this request for the sacrifice of his son and this rock.
So, the whole building is like a cloak that contains a pearl. The dome is a box or a case for that pearl, with the rock at its center.
But the rock has another story, that of the night journey of the Prophet Muhammad. Every year, Muslims celebrate it during a large public festival. On this sacred day, all the followers with their families cross the old city's souk in the direction of the esplanade. Celebrated throughout the world, this festival takes on a special dimension in Jerusalem. According to traditional accounts, the night journey took place between Mecca and Jerusalem. The holy city would therefore be the very place from where Muhammad ascended to paradise on a flying horse to meet all the prophets who preceded him, including Jesus and Abraham. On the esplanade, families gather to pray and tell the children about the events of this sacred night.
In those times, the distance between Mecca and Jerusalem required a month's travel by camel, the transport of the time. But God carried the Prophet on the night journey here. In a single night, and even in just part of that night, he made him ascend to heaven. He arrived in heaven, he spoke directly to God during that sacred night. And it was that night that God imposed the 5 prayers that we do every day and every night. So this is a very important event for all Muslims.
Prayer, a pillar of Islam. It is performed 5 times a day in the direction of Mecca. Inside the dome, the women plunge their right hands into an odorous cavity whose perfume, which they bring to their face, is supposed to be that of the Prophet. Another ritual consists of looking at the surface of the rock for a trace of a footprint, however invisible. According to tradition, this imprint is the one left by the Prophet when he ascended into heaven.
Islam is not a religion of incarnation, so one is not supposed to worship relics in any way. At the same time, the faithful need signs. So if one cannot have a religion of relics, but still need signs, what else is there besides footprints? Footprints are prints in the strict sense of the journey of the Prophet on earth.
The affirmation of this new religious identity in continuity and confrontation with other religions will also be reflected in architecture. Islam wants to rally new believers. It needs an architectural proposal worthy of its ambitions. Plans, structure. Muslim builders are inspired by the sacred monuments already present, and at the same time, they invent their own codes.
We're looking at an octagon. The octagon is the perfect transition between the square and the circle. And we know this very well in Islamic tradition, in religious anthropology. The circle is the divine and the square is the earth. So this octagon, this envelope, is exactly this transition between the earthly world and the world of the divine. The world of the divine is represented by the dome itself, by its perfect circle. The dome of the rock is a point of contact between the divine world and the earthly world.
The originality of the monument, its architectural strength, also rests on all its infinitely worked interior decorations.
The marble was cut in an extraordinary way. It was done in a way which made the veins inside visible. And then, there are also the shapes that have been created by architects and craftsmen, using veins, using marble, and playing with the slices of stones. Of course, this technique is also found in Roman and Byzantine architecture, and craftsmen, Muslim or not, used this model.
For the first monument of the conquering Islam, techniques and materials usually used by Christians are largely reused. Resting on a circular arch of 12 columns and 4 pillars, with a diameter approaching 20 meters, the dome of the monument is as sumptuous inside as it is outside. It is 30 meters high. Its wooden structure is covered with chiseled copper leaves, enhanced with gypsum, and engraved with verses from the Quran. On the sides, the stained glass windows reflect light and the mosaics are omnipresent.
The Dome of the Rock is an excellent example that I will use to highlight the link that exists between continents and between civilizations. Islamic art during the Umayyad period was linked to religion. But it was the artists who decorated and adorned the churches, who converted to the new religion and decorated the Dome of the Rock.
The art of mosaics, inherited from the Byzantine period, is perpetuated in one of the last workshops in Palestine. With the same movements, the same dexterity to cut the tesserae, these fragments of earth and glass, the craftsmen reproduce the most beautiful motifs of the Dome of the Rock in view of the necessary restorations. These mosaics stand out as a signature of Umayyad architecture.
We have the stone mosaic that does not reflect light. The use of glass is related to the light, the luminosity, the lighting of the sacred place. Not only to enlighten us, but also to create an atmosphere. So the lighting we find at the Dome of the Rock was designed to create an atmosphere conducive to worship. For a 10 by 10 centimeter square, we need at least 100 tiles of mosaic. So for 1 squared meter, we need 10,000. And for 1,200 square meters, how many people does it take to cut the tiles and make the mosaic? What they did was astonishing. For the Dome of the Rock, there are not only pieces of glass, there are shells and gold. The mosaicist wanted to represent paradise. We find wheat, we find figs, we find olives. They are the riches of the country, those which people who lived in Palestine ate, but presented on a tray as if to say to us, "This comes to you from the riches of God, so be grateful."
فكن شاكرا له.
After the construction of the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, the conquests of the Umayyad dynasty continued at lightning speed. Their domination will extend even further to the west. From the Middle East, they settled as far as the Atlantic coast. But in 750, power changed hands. The Umayyad leaders were decimated by other Muslims, their enemies, the Abbasids. One territory escapes their control, the Iberian Peninsula. The last survivor of the Umayyads took refuge there, the young Prince Abd al-Rahman I. He founded a new state in Cordoba on the banks of the Guadalquivir. A skilled and charismatic diplomat, Abd al-Rahman I sought at all costs to revive the influence of the Umayyads despite the annihilation of his own by the Abbasids. He had to build his great mosque, inspired by the buildings constructed by his ancestors, like the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. Cordoba would soon be the cultural and artistic home of all Muslim Andalusia, then called Al-Andalus.
Abd al-Rahman I is an Umayyad who escaped at the end of the Damascus dynasty and crossed all of northern Africa and the Strait of Gibraltar. Here he managed to get the Muslim leaders of the Al-Andalus Peninsula to elect him emir. And it is here that Abd al-Rahman I built his great mosque. Political and religious powers were always linked, and he decided to build it close to the bridge of Cordoba, near the Roman bridge, which is the umbilical cord, the access road to Cordoba. When Abd al-Rahman built the mosque, he used a range of materials that he had at his disposal throughout Cordoba. There were many Roman buildings that were constructed, not counting all the Visigoth churches, and he built this one, which would be the emblem of the Umayyad dynasty and Al-Andalus.
Abd al-Rahman I ordered the construction of this mosque, this building, in 785. In the year 788, Abd al-Rahman I dies, while the building is almost finished. This is an extremely fast construction, and we have a hypothesis that explains this almost impossible speed of construction. If we build an arch with vault stones, the stones must be perfectly cut for the arch to fit together. But if we alternate the stones with bricks, it makes an accelerated construction of the vaults possible. The joints of the bricks make it possible to correct this geometric lack of precision at the level of the stones. This is a fundamental element.
After the construction of Abd al-Rahman I's founding mosque in 786, 3 phases of expansion will accommodate the ever-increasing faithful. The huge extension projects made the Mosque of Cordoba the largest mosque in the world in the 10th century after Mecca, with an area of 23,000 square meters. Among these extensions, one is remarkable. The one initiated by Caliph al-Hakam II, where there is a sumptuous mihrab decorated with gold. The mihrab is an essential architectural piece, present in all mosques. It indicates the direction of Mecca, the direction in which one must turn to pray.
This mihrab is very big, and when we enter it, the space is enormous, which gives us the feeling of a door to the afterlife, to the light and to heaven. There is a singular perspective in this part of Al-Hakam II. The architects were able to create a space that leads us to this precise point. Thus, the central nave, which we can see here, clearly evokes this road towards the right path, this idea to take towards the mihrab, which is like a sort of door of light. When Muslims entered this place, they saw this light that would lead them to heaven, that would lead them to the right path, to true Islam. The reports say that Al-Hakam sends a letter to the Byzantine emperor so that he may provide him with craftsmen who will be able to produce this very complex ornament. Because if the walls are about a flat decoration, the domes are curved, which are more difficult to make. And according to the reports, the empress sends him a craftsman, tesserae, as well as materials to make the mosaics.
After having dominated the Iberian Peninsula for more than 5 centuries, Muslim power is under threat. Battles led by Christians are launched to drive out Muslims. It is La Reconquista, the reconquest of Muslim territories. In Granada, in Seville, in all of the Spanish regions where the Islamic civilization has taken root, Christianity must be reborn, victorious and triumphant. Ferdinand III takes over Cordoba in 1236. It's the end of Muslim worship in the mosque, but the Catholic king will take the unexpected decision not to destroy the building.
When Ferdinand III conquers the city, the Christians take possession of this place. It is clear that the peculiarities of this building in terms of construction, its sumptuousness, its splendor, especially the level of decoration on the mihrab of Al-Hakam II, left everyone admiring this architectural jewel. And it is obvious that it was such a beautiful building that it could easily continue to be used for Christian worship, and that destroying it would have been madness. They even used the building for 250 years without making any fundamental changes to the mosque. So it does not stop being a sacred place, a place that was previously used to pray to Allah and that Christians use at that time to pray to God.
The conversion of the mosque into a church took place in several stages. In the immense space, Christians first settle in the most luminous area of the mosque in order to be able to read the liturgy. But 2 centuries later, in 1523, a radical decision was taken. The destruction of the center of the monument to build a brand new cathedral embedded in the middle of the old mosque. Three centuries of titanic work will be necessary to complete the work to the glory of Christianity. A monument shaped by a great history, transformed and redesigned. The Cathedral Mosque of Cordoba has known different civilizations. Each era has left its mark on the stone, and the sacred thread of the building has crossed the centuries. The Reconquista, led by Catholic kings, pushed Muslims into exile in North Africa. This was the definitive end of the last Umayyads. In the 9th century, while the other great dynasty, the Abbasids, controlled the Muslim world, Ibn Tulun, a young ambitious governor, was sent by the Caliph to the city of Cairo. He will build a remarkable monument there. The Ibn Tulun Mosque is considered a jewel of Abbasid architecture. Of all the mosques in Cairo, it is the oldest. It is the affirmation of a sober, bare architectural style, a real break from the flamboyance of the Umayyad. With its huge square courtyard, it is also the largest in Egypt.
The most important thing about this mosque is its simple architecture. Architecture that's not flashy, it's not glitzy. It's an architecture that does not have colors in its decoration, no tiles, no paintings. It's all very pure. And it's built by very simple material. It's built by fire brick that was plastered over. And that's it.
Of remarkable sobriety, as seen in the foundation of ablutions, a simple black marble placed in the middle of the vast courtyard, surmounted by a dome devoid of artifices. Ibn Tulun, the commissioner of this mosque, is a son of a slave from Samarra in Iraq. When he arrived in Cairo in the year 868, one of his first visionary decisions was to create a new city whose heart would be a mosque. He demands a new style from his architects, but he wants an element that echoes the mosque of his hometown, Samarra, with its unique minaret of helical shape points. Ibn Tulun had a copy erected, attached to his mosque, as the mark of the Abbasid presence in Egypt. He launched projects that heralded a major breakthrough in Muslim architecture.
When Ibn Tulun wanted to build his mosque, he told the architects no columns should be used in my mosque. And the architects told him, why go through all this difficulty? It's easy. We go to any ancient monument, we go to churches, we go to synagogues, old, that were destroyed probably. We get the columns and we build, like the previous mosques were built, this way. He said, no, I don't want any of that. I don't want you to go and destroy ancient monuments or churches or synagogues or any of that. I want you to build me this type of pier that I want. These robust piers support arches, and these are pointed arches. It's the first pointed arch that we have in Egypt, and probably the oldest pointed arch in the history of architecture is right here. The arches themselves are very graceful.
In his desire to distinguish himself from his predecessors, Ibn Tulun imposed a new conception of Islamic art. Inspired by the Iraqi deserts in which he spent his childhood, he highlights this heritage, favoring the sobriety of the decoration. This meant a complete breakaway from Umayyad art, which was based on elaborate mosaics in the Byzantine style.
The Mosque of Ibn Tulun is different from what was before, like in the Dome of the Rock and in Cordoba. There was big, huge areas that are made of mosaics, but it is vases and flowers and trees and pearls and jewelry. The revolution was by the Abbasids. Abbasids came over and they obliterated everything that was Byzantine, and in order to imply a new character for Islamic art, they went into the abstract.
The 128 windows of the mosque, pierced in the thickness of the walls, are all different. A work of incredible finesse that alternates the geometric shapes carved into the stucco, a type of plaster, the raw material for all the cladding of the mosque. A mixture of plaster, glue, pulverized marble, slaked lime, chalk, and pigments, all bonded by water, stucco allows the creation of thick coatings with an aspect and hardness of the stone, while leaving the craftsmen the freedom to fashion their creations by hand. Inherited from the Greeks and Romans, stucco is now a characteristic artistic signature of Abbasid art.
The Toulon came from Samara, and there everything was made of stucco, almost everything. The whole of Mesopotamia is famous for stucco work. Yeah, I don't think there are workers now who can do this work anymore. The decorations are very elegant. It's like for me, it's like lace. It's very delicate designs, how they put the designs together. The interlacing circles with the leaves. Yeah, I find it very, very chic.
We find that the windows are never centered with any arch. So we want to center the windows unconsciously. And once you center one window, you're seeing the second. So we move within the building until we center without knowing. And once you center the second, you are centering the third and fourth, and then it becomes endless in the movement within the building. And once you reach that point of entering a building that you are constantly moving in it, it shows ultimate degree of architecture. Because architecture in itself is the sense, it's the art of movement, not the art of static structures, because you are living within the building.
During the 5 daily prayers, the Ibn Tulun Mosque comes out of its silence for a moment. Facing the mihrab, which points to Mecca, the faithful men of the neighborhood arrive to worship. At the height of the greatness that he returned to Egypt under his mandate as governor, we can imagine Ibn Tulun here, facing this mihrab with a large crowd behind him. Yet today, few remember Ibn Tulun. He would rest in anonymity a few steps from the mosque in the middle of the city's great cemetery, in this mausoleum, unknown and ignored for centuries. Historically known as the Tomb of the Abbasids. On the walls, stucco decorations and verses from the Quran. On the ground, 2 graves, one large and one small. It is in the smaller of the two that the remains of the great leader would be found.
Before the Abbasids, the cemeteries and the domes of the mausoleums were not ornamentally rich. Many new cemeteries were created after the advent of the Abbasids and Ibn Tulun. These were characterized by their ornamental richness with plants, stucco, and calligraphy. All this highlighted the beauty and magnificence of these mausoleum domes.
Following an ancient Egyptian tradition, as a sign of eternal life, the guardian of the cemetery places a cup of water on each tomb. Men and dynasties disappear, leaving only traces of their passages engraved in stone. After a progressive weakening, the Abbasid dynasty's decline is final. From the 13th century, the Ottomans dominate the Muslim world. Constantinople, known today as Istanbul, becomes the epicenter of power. In the 16th century, the Ottoman dynasty reached its peak under the reign of an extraordinary sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent. At the time, it was the most populous city in the world, a crossroads between East and West. Like all the powerful rulers, Suleiman the Magnificent ordered the construction of a monumental mosque in his honor, the Suleymaniye, a symbol and reminder of the Ottoman Golden Age and its most illustrious sultan. The Suleymaniye is today one of the most important monuments in the history of sacred Muslim architecture. Every Friday, the mosque attracts large crowds for the Great Prayer. Prayer is the only ritual celebrated in all mosques. No other ceremony, be it marriage or burial, may take place there. To build his mosque, Suleiman the Magnificent chose a strategic location, the top of a hill overlooking the city and the Bosphorus, with the European and Asian banks on each side. A symbol for what was nicknamed the Sultan of Two Lands and Two Seas.
Suleiman the Magnificent was about 50 years old when he decided to build the Suleymaniye and its complex. Up until this age, he spent most of his time on horseback, having conquered a vast empire that went from the Balkans to Central Europe and Hungary to the gates of Vienna. And then after he turns 50, he decides to make his empire. But he also wants to mark the glory of Islam, and so he builds this mosque.
The construction of this mosque is also explained by a practical necessity. Constantinople, more and more populated, desperately lacks space of worship to welcome all the worshippers. But for Suleiman the Magnificent, the challenge is also to compete with the splendid Basilica of Saint Sophia. The Byzantine masterpiece was a seat of Eastern Christians until the capture of Constantinople in 1453 by Sultan Mehmed II. Overwhelmed by its beauty, the sovereign conqueror forbids its destruction. However, the building was immediately converted into a mosque. But despite its conversion, Saint Sophia remained a cumbersome symbol of the city's Christian past.
The power of Byzantium was embodied by Saint Sophia, That is why, after the conquest of the city, all the sultans had their own mosques built in an attempt to downgrade St. Sophia to demonstrate their strength. We see a continuous effort to surpass the power of St. Sophia's architecture.
It is the chief sovereign architect, Mimar Sinan, who will set about the task of creating a building that would eclipse St. Sophia. He will make it a personal challenge and will meet it with brilliance, and thus will be remembered as the master of Ottoman Islamic architecture. The mosque's archive library holds a unique book, a book of calligraphy written during Sinan's lifetime that tells his story.
Written entirely by hand, at Sinan's request just before his death, this book occupies a very important place in Ottoman history. It offers us information about Sinan's whole life, his vision of things, his relationship with Sultan Suleiman, and even their disputes and the Sultan's threats.
In this text, Mimar Sinan says that at 23, he was snatched from his family by representatives of the Sultan. This was a fate of many young Christians of the time who were forcibly converted to Islam. With the status of slaves, they were integrated into a special order, that of Janissaries. They received an education and could later occupy high positions in the army or in the administration. For Mimar Sinan, now chief architect, the construction of the Süleymaniye Mosque is the crowning achievement of his career.
The Sultan, how fortunate, ordered me to build him a beautiful mosque. After renovating his old palace, I began the foundations of the Süleymaniye. In this monument, Mimar Sinan worked with the most famous craftsmen of his time. He tried to achieve perfection. For every detail, he chose the best workers and artists available for the construction of this building.
Seeking to satisfy the Sultan's impatience to have his mosque the largest and most sumptuous possible, Mimar Sinan does not hesitate to bring exceptional materials from the four corners of the empire or to strip older sacred monuments.
As the stones were sought from unique sites, be they shrines or temples, it is probable that there was a sacred dimension that was intended. It is hoped that somewhere the manna of the ancestors or divinities who protected this temple will protect the mosque.
Among the different columns, we notice some of marbled red, the imperial color of excellence. They are the porphyry, a material much harder than marble and whose only known mine had been exhausted by the ancient Romans. Fascinated by this material that they didn't know how to work with, the Ottomans brought these columns from distant cities like Baalbek in Lebanon or Alexandria in Egypt. According to them, these columns had a supernatural origin.
There are texts that tell of the magical dimension that these pieces of porphyry had in the imagination of the sultans and the people. The porphyry columns came from mountains on which giants worked, and they used to pour water into molds, and then place plants that colored the stone when it solidified. And indeed, when we look closely at the porphyry, we see these veins and these reflections of very different colors.
But beyond these exceptional materials, it is, above all, the structure of the mosque that shows the genius of Mimar Sinan. The great architect innovated by adapting his architecture to the needs of the Muslim faith, which requires large open spaces for prayer. Its objective, to furnish the interior with a minimum of columns and thus give the sensation of a spacious and open expanse.
This feeling of elevation is extraordinary. When you enter this mosque, you immediately feel this elevation. There is an extraordinary light with a lot of windows and very colorful stained glass that give this clarity.
138 windows spread natural light inside the Suleymaniye. The stained glass windows, made with glass from Venice, are often blue or bright red, accentuating the white of the stones. To perfect the lighting of his mosque, Mimar Sinan also installed hundreds of oil lamps, replaced today by electricity. The soot from the lamps could blacken the walls and damage the decorations. Sinan then set up an ingenious air circulation system. According to records, to test his invention, the great architect requisitioned workers by asking them to smoke the hookah in the mosque. The smoke was drawn through chimney ducts to high rooms where it was deposited on the walls. It was then recovered and reused.
Soot from the candles was scraped off the wall, collected in boxes, and mixed with water and spices to make ink. This ink was then attached to the necks of camels leaving for Mecca or Medina, the sacred ground. Shaken during the outward and return journey, this ink finally obtained the right consistency. Then it was used to write the Qurans or for calligraphy.
This high-quality ink was given by the Sultan to the best calligraphers of the empire. In this small school on the banks of the Suleymaniye, a few devoted enthusiasts perpetuate this ancestral art.
All Muslims, when looking at history, understand the importance of the art of writing. Because at the heart of Islam is the book cherished by all Muslims, the Quran. So calligraphy is a tool, or a search to perfect the writing, a quest for refinement. That is why calligraphy is at the same time a message, a letter, a painting, and an art.
Examples of this art can be found on the walls of the Suleymaniye. Human and even animal representations are forbidden in Islam. Therefore, calligraphy occupies a central place in the decoration of mosques. The Ottomans have become masters of this art.
It was a time when printing did not exist. People had no Qurans. The presence of verses and important comments in mosques filled this gap, allowing the followers to read these texts.
Both inside and outside, calligraphy thus recalls the main verses of the Quran and the main rules of Muslim worship.
First, we must detach ourselves from worldliness, and for that, there is the ritual of ablutions. We do not wash ourselves because we are dirty, but to clean ourselves spiritually, symbolically. For example, when we've spoken badly to someone, we have the opportunity of correcting our mistakes by cleaning our mouth 3 times. And in the same way, if we hear calumnies and our ears are polluted, we wash our ears.
Ablutions are an obligatory passage for all Muslims. It is impossible to pray in the mosque without first being purified. Even today, the Suleymaniye is frequented daily by thousands of Istanbul faithful. Mimar Sinan succeeded in constructing such a building in only 7 years. The architect had no other choice, so strong was the pressure of Suleiman the Magnificent. The Sultan wanted to see his mosque finished before he died, and above all, he did not want to lose face before the Shah, his great Persian enemy. A legend bears witness to their rivalry.
It was said that Suleiman the Magnificent could not finish his mosque because he lacked money, and therefore the Ottoman Empire was weakened. In order to humiliate Suleiman, the Shah of Iran sent a chest full of jewels, precious stones, diamonds and sapphires, saying that Suleiman only had to sell them to finish building his mosque. And this greatly annoyed Suleiman the Magnificent, who gave the box to Mimar Sinan, saying, "Take it and do what you want." And this is how the architect then mixed the jewels into the mortar prepared for the construction of a minaret. When sunlight touches the minaret, it shines brighter than others and is still called the Minaret of Jewels today.
Legend or reality, this story bears witness to the centuries-long rivalry between the Ottoman Empire and the Persian Empire. This confrontation culminated under the great Persian Safavid dynasty. At the beginning of the 17th century, Shah Abbas, the greatest of the Safavid rulers, wanted to make the capital, Isfahan, the epicenter of Shi'ism. Shi'ism and Sunnism, two distinct branches of Islam. This division dates back to the Prophet's death. It opposes those who follow the descendants of the Prophet's family, the Shiite minority, to those who make allegiance to the Prophet's companions, the majority Sunnis. The Ottomans are Sunni, while the Persians are Shiites. And this religious particularity will also be expressed in architecture.
At the time, in Isfahan, we had an intense competition between the city of Isfahan and the Ottoman Empire, whose capital was the city of Istanbul. The Safavid ruler wanted to build an impressive and majestic square that became famous and better known than the city of Istanbul and its monuments. This is why great attention was paid to decoration and the quality of the spaces.
The jewel of this square is the Shah Mosque, built in the early 17th century. It is a centerpiece of Shah Abbas's vast project to transform the city of Isfahan into the capital of Persia. Once through the large door, marked with the discreet effigy of Shah Abbas, recognizable by his mustache, the mosque does not reveal itself immediately. The faithful must use a long corridor in the shape of a chicane to access the inner courtyard. A unique architectural originality that is due to the construction of the building. To be able to be directed towards Mecca, the mosque must form a 45-degree angle with the square, forcing the builders to design this angled corridor to enter the enclosure. In the courtyard, the effect is striking. An immense open space. Four iwans, these gigantic porches of Persian tradition, are distributed in a game of perfect symmetry. There is nothing in common with Ottoman architecture.
Personally, I think it's difficult to speak of a true style of architecture specific to the Ottoman Empire. For example, when we look at Sinan, the principal architect of this period, we see that many of the concepts and forms he used already existed before the Ottoman period and was simply developed and personalized by the Ottomans to a very high level. But the architectural and decorative elements that we see in Iranian mosques, especially in the Safavid era, are, in my opinion, much more innovative, much nobler, and much more beautiful.
The Ottomans and the Persians, cultures and styles that clash with each other. The Persian style, inspired by Shiite thought, creates areas on a human scale. Colors occupy a prominent place, and in particular blue, the symbol of the sky, is very present in Persian mosques.
In the new architectural and urban vision that appears under the Safavids, it's not simply a question of construction. In the center is the human. People become the raison d'etre and the main axis of building design. We begin to follow the principles of fluidity and transparency. This gives us buildings which are lighter and brighter.
Since its construction nearly 4 centuries ago, the Shah Abbas Mosque has suffered the ravages of time. Extreme temperatures, powerful light, and bad weather have degraded the famous ceramics, which gives the monument all its beauty. A major restoration project was launched in 2013 under the auspices of UNESCO. After the last evening prayer, when the door of the mosque closes, the restorers return to their workshop located within the building itself. In the calm of the night, they draw up the cutting plans of the ceramic tiles used in the restoration of the dome.
What you see here is a large view of a part of the dome. That's 1/16 of the dome. This profession has been in my family for generations, and it's a skill that I must preserve. It's an art that comes to us from the Safavid era.
After putting the numbers, we cut the paper. We must be precise, and even if we have 100 meters of paper, we must be very accurate. You have to be on the lines and without using rulers, and then afterwards we glue the cuts to the tiles.
Each piece is composed of about 25,000 pieces of earthenware, of different sizes and shapes. And on the entire dome, we have about 500,000 pieces on the whole surface.
My maternal grandfather was also in this trade. He was called Master Osen Kashitarash, tile cutter, because at the time in the registry office to choose names they took the name of the trade. So my grandfather's name was Osen and his family name was tile cutter, Kashitarash.
The night ends in the Shah's mosque. After being cut, the pieces are assembled according to their numbering in the manner of a puzzle. They are then glued together with plaster on panels weighing no more than 50 kilos.
On the whole dome, we have about 500,000 pieces of earthenware like these. And that adds enormous weight to the dome. In fact, we have almost 1,000 tons of excess weight on the dome, counting the panels and the plaster. So in total, it adds almost 1,000 tons just for decoration. At the time, our ancestors, our forefathers, had designed this dome so that it could support this enormous weight, and they made very precise calculations.
The specificity of this immense dome? A double shell system. It revolutionizes sacred architecture by allowing the construction of even larger domes. It involves building with two domes. The one on the outside is supported by the smaller one on the inside. This device makes it possible to distribute the weight while masking the elements of the structure. Another ingenuity of the dome, acoustics. In theory, the followers throughout the mosque should not be able to hear the prayer coming from the hall. But in a central point of the ground, at the exact center of the dome, the slightest sound spreads through the space of the mosque in repeated echoes. The vaults dug into the walls and the dome act as a sound box.
When someone stands here in the courtyard of the Shah's mosque, one is happy entering this vast and open space. It's as if one's spirit is flying away. Especially in this desert region, where we're confronted with the lack of water and greenery. These magnificent mosaics evoke flowers, water, nature, and it makes us live a kind of dream.
Shah Abbas's great dream, with his visionary thinking, is that of a modern universe where man and nature would not be opposed, but intimately linked. For him, architecture must reflect the image of the world.
The image of the world is translated into Persian as Naqsh-i Jahan, and that was the name of the garden that was here, where all the beauties of the world were gathered. The Iranians have several millennia of experience in the art of making gardens, and in particular, the ability to recreate in arid environments a miniature paradise, despite the lack of water. Shah Abbas wanted Isfahan to be the paradise it was imagined to be in Safavid times. Everywhere in the city, we work on shade and light, water, spaces. And some say that this mosque is to Isfahan what the tuba tree was to paradise.
The Muslim tradition tells the story of this tree of paradise, whose branches, laden with all the fruits of creation, provided a benevolent shadow and where time stood still. At the foot of this tree, a basin of clear water to quench the thirst of the newcomers to paradise. Shaped by Shah Abbas, this representation of the garden paradise assumes all its meaning in the city of Isfahan. The word paradise, found in many languages, derives from the Persian word pardi.
In the Quran, there are 45 verses in which paradise is described in a similar way, with canals shaded by trees. And so they decided to take these elements from paradise for the garden city that would become the Safavid capital.
On Maiden Square near the riverbank, another monument rises with an earth-like ochre-colored dome. This is the Lotfola Mosque, an oratory reserved for the royal family. As you enter the building, a long, dark corridor leads to a unique and vast prayer room, a theater of striking plays of light.
In this room, light is a symbolic representation of divine wisdom, of illumination, a divine sign of excellence, and one can find oneself transported out of oneself and out of this place into a spiritual space that allows communion with the divine. This lighting is carried out by skylights, which are on the base of the dome and which regulate the arrival of light.
In the corners of the prayer hall, distorted squares resemble abstract art. These are actually extracts from the Quran. Here, this surah condemns those who turn away from the poor and orphans. This geometric Kufic script is an Iranian characteristic present in all the buildings, notably on the minarets of the Shah's mosque. These infinite decorative variations all bear sacred texts. Between visible and invisible, nature and architecture, the Safavids have achieved a synthesis that continues to this day in Isfahan.
The city actually has two components. On the one hand, there is a rational conception, the geometric and mathematical component, which is rational and artificial, and on the other hand, the organic and living, irrational and bodily component that is not planned but simply present. These two elements are found in a city, a beautiful city, which can be seen as the symbol of Iranian and Shiite Islamic culture and civilization. Isfahan is the manifestation of Iranian philosophical thought in harmony with nature and mankind.
On the roof of the mosque, a group of young men sing Quranic texts a cappella, a Shiite Persian tradition perpetuated for generations. After Shah Abbas's death, the Safavid Empire went into decline, but Persian culture continues to flourish in India, where Muslims have lived since the first conquest of Islam. In the 17th century, India was ruled by Shah Jahan, a great Muslim empire of the Mughal dynasty. The Mughals, originally from Central Asia, were largely inspired by the Safavid arts and architecture. The monuments built under their reign mark the height of Muslim expansion in India. One of the symbols of the Mughal dynasty, the Jama Masjid, the Great Mosque of Delhi. It is an open mosque. The covered space is small, while the courtyard where one prays is immense. This mosque is integrated in the heart of the tumultuous old city. The three large doors overlook the bazaar surrounding the building. When you cross the threshold, the rules of purity apply. You must take off your shoes, and you cannot eat there. But the courtyard remains a lively place that constantly welcomes the faithful.
It is undoubtedly a living monument, and that is why this mosque is not only different from other places of prayer, but also from all other historical monuments. If you go to other sacred places or monuments, you won't see as many people coming and going, and that's what makes this mosque so beautiful. People come from all over the country to see the Jama Masjid. And among them, there are people of all religions. There are Hindus, Christians, Sikhs. And there are also people who have time to spend before going to the train station. They too come to Jama Masjid, and they wait. They spend time here.
This mosque, so important in the eyes of the Muslims of Delhi, was born from the will of Emperor Shah Jahan. His name meaning King of the World, he was one of the greatest Mughal emperors. Shah Jahan, the sovereign builder, entered the history of world architecture after building the famous Taj Mahal, a huge mausoleum for his beloved wife. Shortly afterwards, Shah Jahan launched a new architectural challenge, the construction of the Jama Masjid, inaugurated in 1656. The building of this mosque marks the will of the sovereign to transform Delhi into a true imperial capital.
The Mughal emperor had an ambitious vision, and he implemented this vision in monuments. He competed with other kings like the Ottoman emperor and the Safavid king of Iran. And so one important thing for the Jama Masjid is that it's enormous.
The Jama Masjid Mosque can hold up to 25,000 people. The emperor had the mosque built on a hill. He wanted it to dominate the city, even higher than his own palace. The Jama Masjid looks like a fortress, a characteristic of the mosques in the region. In the event of conflict, especially with other religions, they offered the possibility of a refuge for Muslims. To make his mosque the new jewel of Delhi, Emperor Shah Jahan adopted what he considered to be the height of sophistication, Safavid architecture. In Delhi, we find a common feature with the great mosque of Isfahan, the double shell.
We are standing inside.
We are inside the central dome of the Jama Masjid, which is in itself an incredible experience, as it is very difficult for people to access this place.
The Mughals had perfected the technique of...
The Mughals had perfected the technique of building the double dome. Visiting the Jama Masjid, one has the impression of having seen a great imposing monument that is built on a large scale and where equal thought has been given to power and beauty.
The mosque is mainly built in red sandstone, the imperial color. This singular color offers the possibility of a decoration based on contrasts. Red blends with white or black marble to create motifs inspired by Persian earthenware.
The Mughals had come from an area where mosaic, beautiful, intricate design tiles were used in Central Asia. Well, that technique was not known to Indians then, and they had no other alternative than to use colored stone, which was abundantly found all around India. And Shah Jahan exploited that perfectly. And the idea was from Persia, but the artisans were Indians. So there are many features now which we find is neither in purely of, which could be termed purely Persian or purely Indian for that matter. It's a blend.
However, the Mughal king succeeded in developing his own style. The arches have a particular serrated leaf-shaped pattern. They are found everywhere in the mosque. This is one of the original features of Shah Jahan's architecture, based on the repetition of characteristic elements.
Inside, there are prayer mats made of stone, with marble and black stone. And the inscription behind me, which is a long inscription, is in a beautiful calligraphy. And it is made without using any other material. It is only stone.
These calligraphic inscriptions trace the history of the monument. We learn that the mosque cost 1 million rupees, a considerable sum for the time. Many semi-precious stones, which have now disappeared, adorned the walls. But this pearl of Mughal architecture is now threatened. It is gradually degrading because of monsoons, heat, and pollution.
This monument requires, day-to-day care, because it's an old monument, like an old man who requires, everyday pills. So like that, conservation or maintenance is a process which has to be attempted regularly. We try to copy or exactly reproduce the methodology which had been used during Shah Jahan's time. You have to train the artisans, you have to guide them, teach them, and provide them proper skill training.
About 10 years ago, the Jama Masjid underwent major renovations. In particular, part of the facades had to be redone in stucco. In Shah Jahan's time, stucco was not used for decoration, but to replace marble. The emperor had a fascination for this noble stone, but because of its rarity, marble was extremely expensive.
They could not, afford putting marble on this side also. So just to match it, just to give, look of marble, they have applied white plaster. You can see the difference. This is marble facade, whereas this portion from here, this side, from here to this, the other end, you find, small line, white line has been used to give a look of marble. When we plaster, we follow the traditional methodology. The composition of the material is also, almost kept as had been prescribed. We use, powdered bricks, burnt bricks, and then we mix it with some ingredients. There is a broth which has adhesive qualities, that is mixed. And at places we also use some pulses. There is one, pulse now which I can quote, which we use also. That is urad dal. Urad dal, which we eat also in India. We, soak it in water, and then it is grinded, and then mixed.
In the recipe, we also add shell lime, egg white, cream, and tobacco juice. Surprising materials, but to the eye, the illusion is perfect. In the morning, before the worshippers have arrived to take over the esplanade, a strange ballet begins. It's not dust in the center, but millet, the food eaten by the hundreds of pigeons omnipresent on the site.
There's a lot of food on the ground, a lot of millet, and all that millet is offered by Muslims. Some throw 500 grams, others 1 or 2 kilos. And for those who regularly feed them, they have their bad luck canceled out.
Today, a community of passionate breeders continues to work in Delhi. The pigeons, masters of the sky, have become the emblem of the city.
This passion has existed since the time of the kings and emperors. Shah Jahan also had this passion for pigeons.
It was the Mughal emperors who introduced and popularized pigeon breeding in India. Carrier pigeons, racing pigeons, and even combat pigeons. One of these rulers, Akbar the Great, held more than 20,000. The pigeons became one of the symbols of the reign of the Mughal dynasty.
There's a strong connection between water and mosques. In each mosque, it is necessary to have a small water basin where ablutions can be done in order to pray afterwards.
In any religion which had...
And in any religion that was born in the desert, water has a very important place. That is why there is always the desire to build fountains and pools, especially among the Mughals.
Particularly among the Mughals, to establish fountains.
The idea is not only to allow followers to perform ritual ablutions, but also to create a pleasant effect in the courtyard of the mosque. I think that the basin has at the same time a ritualistic, symbolic, and aesthetic importance.
And symbolic aesthetic significance.
Friday, the day of the great prayer for the Muslims. The employees of the mosque get busy in the morning. They spread prayer mats all over the esplanade for the faithful. Shortly after lunch, prayer begins. On two promontories, men faithfully reproduce the gestures of the imam, thus allowing the immense crowd of believers to follow the rhythm. The imam leads the prayer and also occupies the role of spiritual guide. During the Great Friday preaching to the faithful, he addresses theological questions, but also gives advice on daily life, the family, or opinions on current events. All his words are inspired by the Quran and the words of the Prophet.
In all mosques, you need an imam to guide prayers. Whether it's at the Jama Masjid in Delhi or any mosque in the world, you need an imam. And it's the imam's responsibility to convey a message of humanity and to prevent people from doing harm. The imam has many responsibilities. There are wars everywhere in the world, and we must try to stop them. This message is not only for Muslims, but for anyone who is tempted to do harm.
In the early days of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad welcomed his companions into his own home to pray together. But to gather in numbers to stand out against other religions, it was necessary to build monuments. Wherever Islam was established, mosques were gradually built. Since the Dome of the Rock at the end of the 7th century, Muslim builders have competed with architectural challenges, technical feats, and artistic creations on behalf of their dynasties and powerful rulers. But the mosque, whatever the times and territories, has remained the place where an immutable ritual of immense simplicity is practiced: prayer. These mosques bear witness to man's thirst for spirituality and the universal need to connect with the divine.